So we all start worshiping, and then police officers start coming with their trucks onto the beach, onto the sand to surround us. And we hear them yell through their megaphones that it was an unlawful gathering and everyone needed to disperse. And you could see all of a sudden it was this moment where everyone like kind of got quiet, and it's like felt like looking around like, what are we gonna do? And then the band is looking at us like, do we keep going? What are, like, they're looking at Jess like, obviously none of us have been in this situation before. And then this, like, I'll never forget, it was this lady, she had to just be like a few people behind me, and she just goes, sing louder! And the whole crowd just jumps into worship and starts singing Jesus' name, drowns out. I could like hear like just the muffled sound of a police officer trying to yell again. It was an unlawful gathering. And everyone just roars Jesus' name. Like we were worshiping before, and then something switched. So in July 2020, we started, well, honestly, it was originally supposed to be an evangelism equipping conference, and we were planning it for a whole year before. We had committee meetings, and we were in prayer together about what it was supposed to look like and who we were going to invite. And then, well, 2020 happened and all the shutdowns, and I remember being in the woods with Parker and Jessi because we were like, we just need to get out of the chaos of everything that's happening. We went to the woods, and everything was canceling, right? So like the whole point was we were going to send people out to the US Open of surfing, but then the US Open of surfing got canceled. And at one point we were like, okay, if that gets canceled, like then we'll cancel. But Jess just like didn't feel good about it. So I remember we were just like, all of us were just kind of waiting to see what the Lord told her. And some of what he told her almost felt abstract at the time, and until she got it like a super clear, like, I'm not a liar, harvest begins summer 2020. So at that point, it was like, well, everything we thought it was going to look like, all the plans we had made, the speakers, the venue, all of that was scrapped because none of that was even an option anymore. And I remember there was this like anticipation, and it wasn't just an anticipation because for a year we had been praying and planning about it. It was like you could feel, honestly, it was like in the air. It was like there was a buzz where you could feel that God was going to do something. And I just remember, I mean, we had been praying about something like this for years. And going into it, none of us thought like this is the thing. Like the year before, we got people to pray and like 10 people showed up. So to be honest, we didn't even have the faith to even imagine or have vision for what would happen then. It was one of those like, well, maybe that'll happen at some point. But we were really just trying to be obedient. But you could feel this mix and this like, well, people call it a swirl a lot, but you could feel this swirl like something's going to happen and I just can't miss it, honestly, is what it felt like. And then it was like the perfect storm, right? So like we planned that July 3rd, we're going to go to Tower 20, which is like by Tower 20, it's not near anything. But we go to Tower 20, and then we find out a couple days before that they want to shut down all the beaches in California. But then, and again, it's just God, right? It's the only beach, Huntington Beach turns into the only beach that's open on Friday, July 3rd. Like you just can't plan that. City council meets the night before and is like, we're not doing that. 4th of July we're closed, but the rest of the weekend we're open. So it works out perfectly that that's where we are, and that's what we had always been planning. And then I remember, like, again, just this crazy anticipation. We didn't really know what was going to happen, but we knew something was. It's like the whole, we talk about it all the time, but like the see in part, know in part of the prophetic, where it's like you have a taste of what God might do, but even in the taste, you know that you don't actually have a full picture of what God's really doing. And so we show up and there's hundreds of people there, which to us, we're like, oh my gosh, there's so many people, and our little easy up is on the sand. And oh my gosh, it was so cool. But then, and then each week, it was so my favorite was this moment. It was week 3. I remember I was working for a plastic surgeon at the time. So I'm in the office on Fridays and I'm like sending out emails on my breaks and honestly working on the clock for Saturate when I probably shouldn't have been. But I remember the day of, I was like so antsy because I like knew we had been getting like so much resistance. There were like anti-Saturate, anti-Jessi Instagram accounts and petitions and all this stuff, right? And I remember the day of, I'm sitting in the office in Newport Beach, and I just get a text. The team gets a text that says, "Be praying, the cops just showed up to our house." And I'm like charging someone for their Botox, thinking, what in the world is happening? Like, how am I? And honestly, I think that was one of the moments that eventually got me to quit my job, because it was like, how can I be sitting at this desk when God is doing something massive? Like, I have to be a part of it. So we get the update from Jessi and Parker as it's going on. We're like, they tell the cops, like, we can't stop. They're like, you have to stop. And they're like, we can't stop. People are showing up to the beach. Like, God, we have to go. We can't cancel. So we hear, like, we're not canceling, but everyone is like bringing a bandana or handkerchiefs that if something happens, we can like put something on our face if that's going to be the thing that keeps us from getting arrested. And so we had a group, and honestly, it was perfect. The group that was going to do worship was actually used to doing like more acoustic sets, which was great. So we changed the whole plan, and the whole team just got like a full breakdown from Jessi like an hour before. And it was like, this is what we're going to do moving forward. If cops show up and start to break it up, this is kind of how we like switch and move. Because there's honestly a couple thousand people coming to the beach for Saturate. So it's like, how do we herd all of these people? When, to be honest, we didn't have a plan for them until a couple weeks before that. So we decided, like, okay, if the cops come, if things get broken up, one group will go down with people and get baptized. One group will go with people so they can get connected to churches. Another group is going to go and like be praying for people, and had this whole idea of even how we could almost divide and conquer into multiple towers down on the beach. And so we go, and you can just, everyone is there with this anticipation. People are knowing now that, like, I mean, Huntington PD is now on the beach because they know we're at Tower 20. So they're like, all of them are lined up, and everyone is just still flooding in like it was any other Friday. And we decided that instead of doing like a stage, it was just like a little spot that went up on the beach, we were just going to have worship in the center, in the middle of the sand and the beach, and then we just have everyone else surrounding them. And that's how we would do worship, and whoever was going to preach from the middle right there. And so we all start worshiping, and then police officers start coming with their trucks onto the beach, onto the sand to surround us. And we hear them yell through their megaphones that it was an unlawful gathering and everyone needed to disperse. And you could see all of a sudden it was this moment where everyone like kind of got quiet, and it's like felt like looking around like, what are we gonna do? And then the band is looking at us like, do we keep going? They're looking at Jess like, obviously none of us have been in this situation before. And then this, like, I'll never forget, it was this lady, she had to just be like a few people behind me, and she just goes, sing louder! And the whole crowd just jumps into worship and starts singing Jesus' name, drowns out. I could like hear like just the muffled sound of a police officer trying to yell again. It was an unlawful gathering. And everyone just roars Jesus' name. Like, we were worshiping before, and then something switched, and it was like everyone had this collective. Well, honestly, it's what happens when a body of people are doing it together. Honestly, we're like, the person's faith and confidence next to you gives you more confidence, which gives the next person more confidence. And so you hear this like giant mass of people that just refused to stop worshiping the Lord. And you could feel everyone's like resolve. No one was going to go away. Everyone was going to stay. Everyone was just going to just keep worshiping God. And so we did. And to be honest, I mean, we weren't doing anything. So the police officers watched, and they made sure that like nothing got crazy. And we had insane baptisms that day. And I think there was a group that stayed worshiping on the beach for like hours till like 10 or 11 at night, because it was one of those moments where it was like, you just don't know if you're going to get a moment like this ever again. So you just want to stay there as long as possible. I honestly just didn't think, we just didn't know going into it what it was really going to be. So I think in that moment where you like are actually facing like real resistance, right? That you like have a choice to make. There's like a marked decision that you can choose to either like stop because someone's telling you to, or because you know that there's an invitation from God. And for me, it was always like, I just couldn't believe, one, to be able to see what God was doing, and then to feel like he was telling me, like, you can actually be a part of this. Like, how I couldn't have understood why I would say no. I remember telling friends as I was thinking about quitting my job, there's like, this is what we've been praying for. Like, there's such an easy invitation. How it just wouldn't make sense. It would be irrational to say no. And from the outside, it could look irrational because I didn't have another job lined up. Like, from the outside perspective, it didn't make sense, but I could feel God on it so much that even if, what if it only lasted like 6 more months? It was like, even if it's 6 more months, like, even if it almost then, even more so, like, if it's the small window of time, like, I just didn't want to miss it. I like just refuse to be someone that says no when I can feel God's inviting me into something deeper. It felt like God was teaching us a giant mix of things. There was a part of it that was like what we had imagined. God had done so much more, which, to be honest, now looking back, a couple of thousand on a beach, it's still wild, but we've seen so many crazier things. And so it was like almost, and I can't say it was a start. I'm sure there were other times in our life, but in such a short amount of time, there have been so many times that we have vision for something and then God explodes it. So then it almost gives you more confidence then when God gives you vision for something else that maybe seems outlandish, or how could that really happen, or whatever. That if there's any part of us that we're like, oh, but God, could God really do that? Like, well, we've already had him exceed our expectations like a million times over. So it gives you this greater confidence and boldness that even when we're trying to set up the tent that winter and there are things that are coming up and it's not going as planned, like, it creates this ability to just keep pushing through and keep persevering. And this part where it's like, well, we experienced something that we couldn't have planned for that opened our eyes to really how big and powerful and real God is. And so like it's like this to our core, almost like there's more of him, there's more of what he's doing. And so if you just keep pushing, like, there's actually still more. There's like a resolve and a confidence that if we just keep saying yes, like if we're just doing what he asks us to, it actually will all work out bigger and greater and more beautiful, honestly, than we have vision for. Honestly, and because it's still something I do, I think the best way to be a part, and it sounds oversimplified, but it's actually can be more, a lot of people don't do it, but it's the best way to be a part of what God's doing and part of what God's inviting you into is saying yes, no matter what it is. And I feel like God gives us practice a lot with like little yeses, and he'll see what you do with a little invitation. Because to be honest, like, you're just not going to be someone that worships over the sound of police officers trying to get you to go away if you've never just prayed for someone random on the street when God asks you to, or if you're not reading your Bible every morning. Like, the little things that are obvious that God's asking you to do, when you keep doing them, then he'll give you more things to risk with. And I feel like even it's part of how we even learn what God's voice sounds like. Like, it's a little nudging to go do something. And I genuinely believe that even if you get it wrong, if you have a pure heart in wanting to obey the Lord, he does honor it. And so it's saying a million little yeses that just get you to be more and more in line with what God's doing, where then he starts asking you to risk a little bigger and risk a little bigger. And with honestly, the greater the risk, I think the greater the reward. But even now, there's still like little things where he'll be asked to go pray for someone random, or go share the gospel, or honestly, even like go to a different grocery store than the one I thought I was going to. And it's, will you say yes, even if you don't know what the outcome is or what the benefit is to you? Like, and just willing to just go along with what God might be asking you to do. Right now, well, we've been saying it for years that God's looking for hungry people. But there really is, honestly, like it's like there have been lines drawn in the sand, and every time he draws the line, it gets a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And so the call to like say yes isn't just so that you can be like so crazy and part of revival. Like, it's actually just part of following Jesus. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're watching this, like the little nudgings, little promptings, it's not just because honestly, obedience probably should be enough. But to be honest, like God knows how he made you. He knows the plans that he has for you. Like your most full, your best life, like the fullness and honestly brightness of what God has planned for you is on the other side of your yes. So your yes might not look like moving across the country like I did. It might not look like quitting the job that you have right now. God might be blessing the place that you're at. But whatever the plan is for your life, like actually being able to release control and trust God and just keep saying yes over and over and over again. I think if you can get that, you'll actually be ready to weather any storm that might come. Anything that's coming in the next few years, anything that's coming just in 2023, the best way to be prepared for it is to just really be obedient to the Lord. Know what his word says, know what his voice sounds like, know what he feels like, know his person, and then just be willing to like over and over again, just yield to whatever he would have you do.